If you are, you're muted.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize I had to unmute on the application as well. I apologize. I'm here. I had
Okay.
my apologies.
Wonderful.
I'm here. Sorry.
Wonderful. Okay. Yes, we can get going. Rhea, just.
Chair Boyce, we're live.
All right. Very good. All right. Thank you for joining our rescheduled meeting for that is now on Tuesday, April 27th. This is the Technical Advisory Committee meeting. First order of business is the resolution finding the need to conduct the meeting electronically. As follows: as a result of the COVID-19 and Governor Northam's declaration of a state of emergency, the Authority's Technical Advisory Committee meeting is being held electronically. With the recent passage of the amendments to HB 29, the Freedom of Information Act bill, which allows regional bodies such as the Authority and their committees to conduct business meetings electronically, this evening's business meeting is being held remotely. Doing so will help keep us safe, keep safety as a top priority, while ensuring that we are adhering to social distancing requirements. Meeting by electronic means is authorized because the items on the April 27th, 2001 committee meeting agenda are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations of the Authority. So with that, do we have a motion to accept?
So moved. Got Turner here.
A second?
Second.
Second.
All right, anybody opposed, say no. Hearing none, the resolution is passed. Next on the agenda, which, well, thank you. On the summary notes from the last meeting on March 17th, do we have any comments or revisions being requested? Hearing none, do we have a motion to accept the minutes? Go ahead. I saw your lips move.
Sorry, yep, so moved.
All right, second.
Second.
Very well. Anybody opposed, say no. None. So moved. So now we move on to Mr. Jasper, if he is here, or whoever's taking his place.
Hi, good evening, Chair Boyce, members of the committee.
Wonderful.
I am here. Okay, so this evening we're going to go through what we would have gone through last Wednesday. Thanks everyone for coming back this week. This is an important topic, and we did want to give the TAC the opportunity to weigh in. We didn't want you to miss this opportunity to weigh in on recommendations for the transportation technology strategic plan, strategies and action plan. So Rhea, if we could move to the next slide. Chair Boyce, I would like to note that we see some comments in the chat box on comments. We can address these perhaps when we get to the recommendations, and but happy to address sooner if that would be your preference.
That's fine. It looks like Frank had some questions on how the comments that we had were shared, and I answered those. I think as we go through, we might have some comments, but we'll do it the way we usually do, which is kind of a free-for-all.
Okay. In that case, I've got a short presentation here. It's going to cover 5 areas. Why did we develop the TTSP, or the Transportation Technology Strategic Plan? What is it? What are its potential benefits and upsides? How might we use it in certain situations? And then the recommendations, and where does this all fit with NVTA's normal transportation planning and programming priorities. So I'd start that off by, in terms of why we developed this. We have on the screen the vision for transaction, into which the TTSP will be integrated as we move through the update to transaction. So as with transaction, we want the TTSP, the Transportation Technology Strategic Plan, to help accomplish this vision. So this is what is driving everything, both transaction and the strategic plan. It's needs driven. This is the authority's vision, and this is what we're trying to accomplish. Next slide, please. Also embraced within the vision and our approach to both the TTSP and to transaction are the three core values or overarching principles, which may manifest themselves in terms of projects or measures, but also overarching process as well. And as shown on the screen here, these three core values are equity, sustainability, and safety. You've had inputs on this in the past as we developed a vision statement, which was approved in December of last year. So again, that's kind of what we're trying to fit into this. This is helping us to kind of guiding us as we develop the TTSP and what we're trying to achieve. The next slide, please, Ria. So the final part of why we did this, I believe we shared this graphic with you previously, and just to quickly restate, when on the left-hand side we look at a particular manufacturer of a particular product, which is a household name, and you look at the speed of development of the iPhone since it was launched 14 years ago, and we find ourselves asking the question, where will Apple and other technology companies be 14 years from now? And then looking to the right side of this graphic, you see how NVTA approaches its priorities, planning and programming, particularly with planning. You see the 5-year updates to our long-range plan, and now our 2-year updates to funding. It's pretty linear, and so we asked ourselves the question also, where do we want NVTA to be in 2035 in the context of evolving and emerging technologies? So this was what was really driving us. We can see this exponential growth, sometimes I think referred to as Murphy's Law, and how do we respond? Do we try to be proactive or more proactive approach to the adoption of transportation technology? And we'll have a couple of examples in just a moment that Mackenzie will walk you through to give some examples of how that might work. It considers how technologies will support the region's vision, and so we're looking to be driven by our needs rather than driven by technology, but obviously got to be responsive to technology. Specifically, it includes 8 strategies for which we've identified 9 potential roles associated with each strategy. We've talked about this previously, and later we'll be asking you to consider making or taking action specifically related to the 8 strategies. In particular, we see the TTSP document itself is a living document that will continue to be updated as technologies evolve. As such, we are not looking for any action from the committee or the authority with respect to approval of the document itself. For that reason, it is a living document that will need to continue to be updated. And then the action plan, which is kind of the thing which is really we're using to help take the strategic plan into something that will actually be implemented. Enables us to kind of take this big strategic picture to start with, but to begin doing things within that larger framework, and then hopefully build some momentum as more and more technologies adopted within the region, some of which the NVTA may choose to fund in future years if all the eligibility and evaluation requirements are met. So that's what the plan is about. If we could go to the next slide, please, Ria. I just got a couple of slides on kind of how we see the potential benefits that are coming from the TTSP, and these kind of start, fairly high level, but we do believe that a proactive approach is in the authority's interest, to help identify and embrace technologies that support the vision and mitigate or at least identify and take steps to make sure that any technologies that would be counter to the vision are identified and addressed through various means, such as planning, policy, advocacy, funding, and other things. Kind of more immediately in the context of transaction, the TTSP and specifically the 8 strategies will help us develop scenarios for sensitivity analysis to support the ability for data-driven decision-making by the authority with respect to both transaction and subsequently funding programs through our 6-year program. We believe that the TTSP will enable a consistent approach for NVTA's transportation technology investments, which will in turn increase synergies and maximize return on the authority's investments, which of course are taxpayer dollars. We consider that coordinated planning, deployment, and operations is something else which will be derived from implementation of the TTSP. We consider that raising awareness and understanding of technologies among Northern Virginians will help them understand how technologies work and how they could be helpful to the region's mobility and accessibility needs. And we consider that the plan, as it already has done in many ways, will reinforce open and regular exchange of ideas among our staff and the staff of our member jurisdictions and agency partners, which will strengthen the overall regional approach to transportation technologies. Next slide, please. Just wanted to touch on the recommended strategies, since we're going to be asking you to take action on these shortly. You see the strategies in the left column. These are essentially the same 8 strategies that we've been working with for some months. You see in strategy number 7, some text in red font. And this is from a comment that we received regarding the previous wording, which was something along the lines of enhance regional coordination and encourage interoperability for all modes. On reflection, we felt that for all modes was potentially and unintentionally overly ambitious and potentially restrictive. And so we modified that language to be in the transportation system, in part because we felt it was more appropriate for strategy 7, but also we felt it was consistent with the wording of strategy 8, which also refers to the transportation system. So it is a bit clearer what we're talking about, we think, here. In the right half of this table, for each of the strategies, we have an intent statement regarding each strategy that looks to the longer term. I'm not going to go through these one by one. I would note that although we're not proposing this at this time, and maybe something for 6 months down the road, say in strategy number 5, you note the title refers to pricing mechanisms, but to the right, the intent additionally mentions incentives. We actually see that incentives and pricing are, if you like, the carrot and stick here in terms of mechanisms that are enabled by technology. So while the strategy doesn't include the word incentives, the intent does, and I think at some point down the road we might come back to the committee with some suggested rewording once we've had a chance to kind of think that through and make sure that we apply any such changes consistently throughout our approach here. I think I've got one more slide before handing over to Mackenzie. And so, Ria, if you could advance. Go back one. That's it. So again, the strategies are listed down the left side of this table, and the NVTA roles, the 9 roles I mentioned earlier, we have check marks against each of those roles where appropriate for each of the strategies. And while you see to the right 3 columns are specifically staff roles, NVTA staff roles, which could in theory be implemented, but in-house by staff without further, authority approval or whatever from the authority, or indeed through any partnership arrangements. We do feel that all 9 roles would probably be initiated by NVTA staff, but some of them certainly couldn't be advanced without additional participation from partners, and in some cases by authority action. But these are listed here, so we've got these for reference. We can come back to in a while, but I did want to give Mackenzie a quick opportunity to talk about what ways in which the strategic plan could be used, using a couple of examples of technology. I would ask that you focus more on the methodology of what she's saying rather than the actual ratings. The ratings we've used are really intended to be illustrative and not definitive, and certainly not final. And one more thing I'll say just before handing over to Mackenzie is just to restate really from previous meetings that the strategies are numbered, but that numbering is not should not be interpreted or to infer any sort of prioritization or any sequencing for implementation. These are just numbers that we've assigned for ease of reference elsewhere in the document. So I please keep that in mind as we go forward. So with that, I'll hand over to Mackenzie, and then I'll wrap up after she's finished.
Thank you, Keith. Good evening, everyone. And Ria, if you could take us to the next slide, please. This evening, I'm going to walk you through a couple examples of how the Transportation Technology Strategic Plan, or the TTSP, could be used to evaluate technologies as they enter the region. And as Keith just said, we've selected 2 technologies for this purpose, and they are widely familiar, and there's even one real-world example in this region that's happening now. And the 2 are closely related, but with a few key distinctions that you'll see as I walk through them. The reason for this was that it will help demonstrate the flexibility and versatility of the TTSP as a tool to evaluate even those nuanced differences. Again, I just want to highlight that these are illustrative ratings only, so they are not the final verdict on how we would use the TTSP for specific technology. But I will walk you through both of these, and then I'll pause to see if you have any questions. The first example is electric autonomous transit shuttles, and you'll see the real world example there on your screen is the relay shuttle in Merrifield. In this case, we listed a few of the features of this type of shuttle and then made a couple of assumptions. And the reason here is that, as I said, these are examples, and we haven't reached full adoption yet. So we're making a few assumptions of what the state of the technology would be when we would start to apply the TTSP. So for what's an example of an assumption is that public acceptance of the technology is growing and the shuttles have been determined to be a sound investment and are reaching a return on investment that makes good sense for the jurisdictions and partners in the region. I also want to highlight before we move on, the ratings that you'll be seeing on the next slide are color coded. And you'll see these icons at the bottom of your screen ranging from red to green. Red means that there might be, we anticipate the TTSP may recommend some sort of intervention to maximize the benefit of a technology and minimize any potential negatives. So it's not saying that there is, that we should resist the technology in any way, but rather that we just might need to take some hands-on effort to maximize those benefits. Yellow would indicate that the TTSP would recommend proceeding with caution. So we acknowledge there may be some challenges, but that we need to be aware of in developing our adoption of those technologies, but that there are also benefits, of course. And green indicates the TTSP may advise embracing the technology. And that's not to say there would be no action, but just that we perceive that there will be a great deal of benefits for a particular technology. So with that in mind, Ria, if you could take us to the next slide, please. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about how we would apply the TTSP as a tool to evaluating electric autonomous shuttles. First, we would hold up the technology to NVTA's vision statement and determine how it might further that vision. And you can see the text there at the top of the slide talks about how the technology and the vision statement relate to one another and highlighting a few key words there primarily associated with the core values. Next, we look at each of the core values, which again are equity, sustainability, and safety in terms of the entrance of this technology into the region. For example, when considering electric and autonomous shuttles in the lens of equity, we anticipate the TTSP may say, this technology could really help with first and last mile connections between transit and a destination, or it could help reduce congestion and improve reliable travel times. And you'll see to the right there, once we've gone through a description of how the core value might be used as a lens to look at this technology, what actions the TTSP might recommend. And in this case, it could be to encourage diverse public outreach to make sure people are aware of those potential benefits to equity, or perhaps developing white papers to look at the research and identify any best practices for implementing these types of shuttles and making sure we are capturing those benefits. Finally, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see how we look at each of the 8 strategies, again, numbered for ease of access, and determine which strategy applies to that technology. And in this case, you'll see that all but one are relevant to the electric and autonomous shuttles. And then in the center there, you'll see a series of actions that are bulleted beside that check mark list. The reason that the actions are not divided out per strategy is because several of the strategies might recommend the same action, and we wanted to make sure this was clearly visible and consolidated all into one clean space. So for example, actions that might be recommended by the TTSP for electric and autonomous shuttles might include increased consideration of these technologies in transaction or the 6-year project selection process, or advocating for the Commonwealth to develop policies that contribute to or support creation of electric charging infrastructure. So there's a wide array of things that might be recommended. So that's example 1. Ria, if you could please take us to the next page. We'll look at electric and autonomous personal vehicles or autos. And the key distinction here is we're going from the shuttles to the personal vehicles. And Here we have listed out a few features that might result from these technologies when they do come to market, and they have not yet. But in this example, we will be looking at autonomous vehicles as if they've achieved level 5 of autonomy. And I should define that means they would be able to operate without human intervention in any and all circumstances. So regardless of weather, traffic conditions, etc. So that's the type of technology we're imagining when applying this tool in this example. We also made a few assumptions, such as that these vehicles that are electric and autonomous are entering into a place in market penetration where the purchase price makes them available to the general public. Again, you'll see that the same color-coded rating system will be used. And Ria, if you could take us to the next slide, please. We'll dive a little bit more in depth. Again, we'll look at the how the vision statement may evaluate this technology, which again is electric and autonomous vehicles. And you'll see that it's been given a rating of yellow, meaning that some caution is needed, but that there are still benefits to be brought forth here. You'll notice on this slide, you'll see the first red rating, which again does not mean that there's any sort of prohibitive characteristics of this technology, but just that the TTSP might recommend additional intervention to make sure that we're mitigating any of the potential negatives. For example, the initial cost point for a personal vehicle that is both electric and autonomous may be prohibitively expensive. You'll see there in that equity core value description, which is part of why it was given the red rating. So in turn, the action column to the right of your screen there might recommend that we develop white papers to analyze this technology further and identify best practices for adopting it and welcoming it into the region in a way that is consistent with those NVTA core values. So it's taking those ratings and making sure we have actions that match them and help maximize those potential benefits and minimize the negatives. Again, at the bottom, you will see that we'll look through each of the 8 strategies in the TTSP and see which are relevant to this particular technology. And then again, see a list of sub-actions that are consolidated from throughout the plan and across all of the relevant strategies. In this case, the TTSP might recommend increasing consideration of how to minimize zero occupancy passenger vehicle miles traveled in transaction, or the 6-year program project selection process, or perhaps advocating for jurisdictional policies that support the equitable use of electric and autonomous personal vehicles. With that, since these are illustrative examples only, I want to pause here without going too in depth on the details and see if you have any questions about how this tool could be applied or anything that's been said here too.
Questions from the committee so far? I have none. A lot of shaking heads. Mackenzie, you're doing wonderful.
May I have some comments?
Actually,
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Dr. Zhu, go ahead.
Yeah. So those are very nice, and I think we are all in this emerging. We are facing those emerging technologies, and we are all curious and anxious to see what changes it will bring. But that also probably is a challenge we are facing if we want to apply the principles we have developed in this document to evaluate those different technology. Frankly, I think it's very complicated. And if we can summarize them into this nice, very short table or not, I have some reservations. For example, here, if you are talking about equity issues, I think if you look at the entire transportation system, it's probably not that simple. It's just like when you are offering congestion pricing or toll roads, you can call it both equitable or you can call it not equitable. From different perspective, you release more capacity from the general purpose lanes and improve the experience for everyone. You can call it equitable, but you can also see that as the Lexus lanes and only people can afford it, can use it, then it's not equitable. So from different scope, different perspective, this single nice evaluation, red, yellow, or green, may vary. And also because the technology, most of them are immature, then something sounds safe today may sound unsafe tomorrow. Just like the example in Las Vegas, the first day of operation, you have a crash, then that totally changed how people are seeing the new technology. So I think this is still, there are more things we need to consider before formally embrace this as an agency like NVTA as an effective way to position ourselves. I mean, if we just for discussions and the exchange of opinions, I think it's perfect fine. But if we want to use this as some kind of guiding documents, for example, the transactions or other to develop other programs, then we need to be more cautious.
Sure, Dr. Z, thank you for your comments, and they're wonderful. These are all very, as you say, nuanced concepts, especially the applications of the core goals. And so these slides are meant to be just examples that are kept brief for the sake of the slides. If we evaluated these in depth, we'd never be able to get it into a slide deck. So we would definitely go into with a more nuanced analysis and when it comes time to apply this as a tool and develop things like white papers that would look into the application of those core values. As you mentioned, things change over time, which is important, which is another important reason why we want to keep the primary TTSP document as a living document to allow for those types of development and better understanding as these technologies come to fruition and as do our understanding of the core values mature as we move through the transaction process. So that's a very well understood and well welcomed point of view. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a really great thing to highlight here, as you mentioned, especially with those examples. Thank you.
I mean, they are perfect examples. They highlighted the complexity in this field, so they are good. Maybe we need to spend more time just thinking what would be the best way to communicate or to move forward if we want to consider those technologies within NVTA.
Armand, did you have a question?
Oh, I was just going to make a comment, not not nearly as nuanced as the one that was just made, but just to also say that in a similar vein, that even at a high level, I think rather than just having a description and an action, there needs to be, some additional, and again, not able to be captured on these slides, but as we proceed, making sure that any assessment of this nature, even at a very high level, needs to include both, in a very simplified manner, a pros and a con, not just the positives that may be kind of like the description. I apologize. Rose, I'm sorry. I'm on a phone call. Just a moment, please. I'm sorry, everybody. Excuse me for 1 minute. What, Rose? Rose, what's wrong? Well, I'm on a phone call. You'll have to wait. Just wait. Turn it off then. I apologize, everybody. My 5-year-old is home. I'm home alone with my 5-year-old. Simply put, to just make sure that we, even at a high level, are including both sides of the coin, so to speak, just so that even from the very get-go, people are able to kind of see the various, at least simplified positions as we proceed. So that's all.
Very good. Anyone else on the committee?
Just quick question. For that autonomous shuttle at Dunlorin, do we have any information at NVTA website, or we have link pointing to more information? I think particularly for those things happening in this region, they are perfect education opportunities, both for the public and also probably for ourselves. The more we can learn, the easier for us to build consensus regarding the pros and concerns. And those examples that we can see here firsthand, they are perfect.
Dr. Zhu, to reply to your point, that's an excellent point, and it goes right along with the education outreach goals of the TTSP. I don't know that there's a link directly on our website, but it has been referenced in several of our meeting summaries. But I would like to point out that it's also being covered in the Driven by Innovation newsletter that NVTA publishes periodically, and you can subscribe to that by going to the NVTA website and signing up for our list, where we keep track of regional and statewide and national happenings in regards to transportation technologies. So we keep tabs on that project and regularly post updates when they're relevant in that matter. But we're certainly looking to always expand our education and outreach, especially in regards to the TTSP.
And Chair Boyce, if I may just add to Mackenzie's response, the Dunlorin Mosaic District shuttle is subject to a review, an evaluation by an independent team. I think it's Virginia Tech is doing that evaluation. And certainly the Commonwealth is paying very close attention to it. So we're not directly involved in that, although we do work very closely with all the people who are directly involved. And there was a brief summary about the shuttle at our roundtable back in March. But to be honest, at this stage, it's a little bit too soon to know, the impacts that it's having. Certainly the impacts on people traveling is very, very low because of the pandemic, but there are nonetheless operational experiences and lessons being learned and documented. So we hope at some point, they're not too distant future, there'll be some reporting on that, and certainly as soon as there is, we will take it into account within the TTSP and as Mackenzie said, share it as appropriate through our other outreach channels.
Unless there's other questions, we can continue. Go right ahead.
Okay, I'll pick it up from here. If Ria, you could advance to the next slide. I don't have many slides left. What we are requesting your consideration on this evening is to recommend that the authority approve the 8 TTSP strategies as described in the document. Although please note at the bottom here we are once again not looking for NVTA approval of the document itself, just the strategies, and then the action plan, which we also want to make clear in part in response to comments that we've received through this process, that if we do identify the need for any significant changes or additions to the strategies or the action plan, and certainly Ms. Backman will be the arbiter on this as to whether something is significant or not. But if something is identified to be significant, then there are safeguards in effect to make sure that this comes back through the authority for approval, which in turn would mean it will come back through the committee prior to any approval by the authority. And some examples of what might be significant are shown in 3 smaller bullets on this page. So anything related to our project selection process for the 6-year program. Obviously things may affect that process that are not related to technology. But so whether they're technology related or not, those sorts of things are significant and will come back through the committee and the authority before changes took place. Anything that is added or changed within our annual legislative program, which generally kicks off in early fall of each year. And certainly any future development of regional transportation policies would be considered a significant change. So staff would not be acting unilaterally on things of that nature without coming back early to the committee and to the authority for guidance and approval. Next slide, please, Ria. This next slide really relates to the note on the previous page, and I think probably belabored this one enough already. So if you could move to the next slide, please, Ria. Actually, this slide and the next slide we've covered previously. These are some of the sorts of things that some of the sorts of actions that could, or perhaps more outcomes than actions, would result from the action plan. So affecting transaction scenario analysis, outreach and education, the legislative program. Next slide, please, Ria. Project selection process, funding, and the white papers, etc. So these are the sorts of possible outcomes that might emerge. And then I think I've got a couple more slides. If you could advance, please, Ria. So looking more precisely at the next 6 months, these are the sorts of actions that we would envision should the committee and the authority approve us moving forward with this. So integration of the technology related strategies into transaction scenario analysis, that would be a fairly urgent piece of work. Public engagement, we've not done any public engagement on the TTSP to date, but we are going to be doing public engagement as part of transaction during the spring, and we do want to take that opportunity to gauge Northern Virginians' reactions and thoughts related to transportation technology, so we can embrace those as things proceed. We will continue to monitor market trends and trigger points, which could be federal legislation, obviously not state legislation as such now, since the General Assembly session has concluded, but other trigger points might occur that we will monitor and act accordingly. Really looking to build on the driven by innovation e-blast that Mackenzie mentioned earlier, to kind of take that to the next level. We do want to collaborate on a process for development of future regional transportation policies, so that at some point we can then also begin to develop white papers that relate to potential regional transportation policies. But as things currently stand right now, we don't even have a policy for developing regional transportation policies, since we've not done that previously. And all of this will be guided by the methodology that Mackenzie outlined just a few moments ago. And certainly we'll be sharing those ratings with you and jurisdictional staff to kind of get feedback as we go. And then my final slide, please, Ria, in terms of reporting, because we think that reporting is very important. Excuse me. We will be reporting back using the Executive Director's monthly report to the authority, which is obviously a public document. We'll be doing this each month on all these bullets here. So where applicable, so progress against measures, feedback from citizens and stakeholders, trigger points observed or anticipated, transaction analyses, any revisions to the document that are built around those upcoming related activities, and then consideration of those significant changes if needed. So with that, Ria, if you could go back to the slide with the recommendations on, which is about 6 slides previously. And I'll certainly pause here to take any questions, but I just want to leave you with the slide where we were looking for you to take action this evening. I apologise, we've taken up quite a lot of your time this evening to get to this point.
No problem.
Are you
It's only
seeking
the, it's only
comment
the
and
best.
question?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Frank.
Are you seeking comment and questions now?
Yes.
Yes, okay. One, I'd like to commend the staff for putting together a very comprehensive document that gets to a lot of the issues. We have rapidly changing technologies in the transportation area. This has identified the ways many of those could interact with programming and funding decisions over the next 15 to 20 years. And if this document is a living document that is kept up to date and used by the staff and the authority as they proceed with the planning process, I think it will turn out to be very useful. And looking it over again, I think the 8 strategies that I've identified are very good. I can think offhand of others that could be applied, and perhaps, for example, how a particular technology affects transportation for those persons with disabilities, and maybe those are the sorts of things that can be addressed in updates of this concept, this program as it goes forward. I was a little bit concerned about the process that was used to get TAC input and review on the document. I mean, Randy very nicely provided the what is it called, Workfront, or whatever the word collaboration software and site, so that we could provide comments. But we never got any feedback on the comments we provided. And one of the things that's nice about being retired is you can actually spend time reading and thinking about documents such as this. And I made quite a number of comments, some of which, I can understand. They were put up there for the staff to consider, and if they rejected them, that was fine. But a couple of others had to do with things that were just, sort of errors. Wrong state for a project, duplicate words, editorial things that I came across in reading. And I marked them carefully in the document that, that Randy had provided. And of course, I no longer have access to that. But in reviewing it, I can see that many of the or at least a couple of the things that I marked just were never changed, never addressed as the process went forward. And that disturbs me. As a member of the TAC who spends time trying to respond to your review requests, I'd like to know that someone pays attention to them, and that perhaps we could see what the other members of the TAC commented and what sort of action the staff has taken in response to those comments.
Chair Boyce, would you like me to respond?
Yeah, please.
Great, thanks, and thanks, Frank, for your comments and your concerns as well. I appreciate your comments at the beginning, and I can only apologise with respect to the concerns that you had raised. There were clearly a couple of instances where we missed some stuff. We do have a log that we can share with you after this meeting of the way we addressed each of the comments from TAC. So you've got that transparency into the process that we applied. I mean, you're quite right. There were some comments that we considered and didn't pursue for various reasons. And there were some that we just clearly missed, and I think that was probably because we were focused on probably on more the bigger stuff, but that's not an excuse. There were some obvious errors that were missed and are already incorporated in version 11, which has not been released at this time because we were concerned about version control with this and the other committees. So every committee is still at version 10 of the document, but certainly the one about the state, and there was one where it's I'm not really sure, like a double statement. The same statement was used repeatedly in one sentence. Those have been cleaned up. If there are any others, for any member of the committee, like that they notice we've missed, then please bring those to our attention. We'll fix them straight away. And certainly the version of the document that goes to the authority, be that version 11 or subsequent to that, will hopefully have corrected all those errors. And I don't know. I mean, until this evening, I thought there was only one, but Frank, you pointed out another one just a short while ago. So there's obviously two.
So Keith, this document is available for the public to read, and is it aimed specifically at the normal people that are not transportation professionals?
Yeah, I mean, Pat, thanks for that question. You're right. I mean, it is a pretty detailed, comprehensive document. It runs to about 100 pages. It's written in a way in which we hope most people could pick it up and follow it. I mean, we provide glossary and try and explain terms and cross-reference and so on. But I mean, I wouldn't pretend it was anything other than a tough read. And the purpose of the TTSP is, we've used the expression living document. It is guiding the work that we're doing. It isn't necessary for members of the public to read it, but for those that do, it is available on the website at the moment, generally through the committee web pages where we post the meeting materials. When we get to the point where it's approved by the authority, obviously it'll become more prominent, thereafter we'll also make sure that we let people know when we change it.
I have one question. Am I the only people on the planet Earth that has never heard of a sandbox in the construction of a whatever that is? There's a couple of projects that, and I think I have a general idea what it is, but nowhere, I don't think anywhere do you describe what it. I had to go on Google and get the details, and even at Google they show you a lot of different projects, sandbox projects, but it's hard to actually find a definition of what that is.
Okay, well, we'll address things like that. Jargon is a big problem. We do try and address. I mean, jargon is kind of unavoidable, but where we use it, we do try and explain somewhere in the document what.
I don't know if that's. I might have missed it because the document is so long, but I didn't see it in the glossary or explanation of terms or anything like that.
Mackenzie, do you have something to add?
Yes, if I may add on, that is a great point. Sandbox is quite the nebulous term, but just for background, it's basically a software testing environment. So where they can test changes to a software without having it be live to the public. But your point was great. In the first version we sent to TAC, that wasn't explained. And so in version 11, which is what's posted on the NVTA sites for this meeting, it's added to the glossary for your feedback. So thank you for bringing that up. That was our fault for having missed it, but we did find, I sought out one of those tricky examples and sorted out a definition for you there.
Yeah, I got the idea. Yeah. And it mostly, does it include mostly intersections where they can, provide difference in the light, how long a traffic light goes, or what time of day is the most traffic come, and, do they make it into 3 lanes from 2 lanes? I guess all of that they jiggle around and fiddle with until they find all the right, the things to change.
Sandboxes are typically used for things like app development or program development. Software is on the computer or mobile phone rather than those physical infrastructures, different arrangements, which would be evaluated through something like modeling. So,
Okay, you don't have to explain anymore. I don't
oh,
want
okay.
the time, but I just, I'd seen it actually before I saw it on that. I've encountered it a couple of times this year, and I just wondered what it sounds interesting, but okay, that's all. Thank you. I'm glad you included then something about it.
Any other questions for the staff? So, Keith, we want to have a motion to accept or approve the strategies as outlined in the document. Is that what we're looking for?
Yeah, I believe the agenda had a suggested.
You would think that the chairman would have the agenda in front of him to go through this, but no, I don't. If you could bring that up, I'm sorry.
There you go. It's on the screen.
All right, thank you. All right, do we have a motion to accept to go through with the recommended action, which is to recommend the authority adopt the 8 strategies in the TTSP and action plan?
I move
I'll
to
move.
direct the authority to adopt the 8 strategies in the TTSP and the action plan.
I heard Amy and I heard a second in there somewhere. There we go, Frank. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, that has been accepted. We are recommending that the authority adopt those 8 strategies. Next, transaction update and the NVTA update. Go right ahead with that, Mr. Gassman.
Thank you, Chair Boyce. Just quickly on transaction, activities other than the TTSP, we are working with the consultant Cambridge Systematics to get to finalize like an integrated work plan, which we kind of brings together the planning and analytical side and the modeling side of the work with the engagement and communications side of the work, so that while these strands can kind of move somewhat in parallel, they do need to be in sync and crossover from time to time. So we're just trying to finalize that. There has been quite a bit of activity already on the modeling front, which is somewhat of a critical path item, because since we've changed consultant for this update, we need to kind of reset the modeling side of things a little bit. So that's an activity that's quite kind of intense at the moment, and will remain so for quite a few months ahead of us. And also, our thinking as we go along the way is to make sure that we are working towards the development of the in-house modeling capabilities, which we have long needed and long yearned for, which will now actually come to fruition under this transaction contract over the next 12 to 18 months. So that's kind of very slowly ramping up in parallel with the modeling activity. We are working on with our member jurisdiction staff and regional partners on the development of a candidate project list. You recall that transaction includes a project list, which is the first eligibility filter for what we can fund through our 6-year program. We are refreshing, we will need to refresh the project list that was included in the 2017 adoption. So we've been spending a lot of time over many months on that refresh, and that work is ongoing. Obviously, everything will still be needs driven, but we know because the needs to be a project list, we can work on that in parallel, and then we'll have that ready for when we start doing the analysis later this year and early next year. So that's probably the biggest area of planning activity that's underway at the moment, and it is at the staff level, but we will be sharing information on that in due course. I think that's all there is on transaction for now.
Okay. Thank you, Keith. Mr. Jasper and Ms. Backman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will be brief, just noting just a special thank you to this committee for your diligence in working with us to get to the point where we're ready to bring forward a recommendation to the authority on the Transportation Technology Strategic Plan and Action Plan. This will be on their agenda next month, which is only a few weeks away, May 13th. So I just want to thank you. Frank, your comments are very much appreciated, as is comments of the entire committee. I think one thing we just want to continue to reiterate is that this is a living document. You know, there will be some trial and error when it comes to the implementation component, and the authority will not be the single implementing agency. So we are looking for some of our jurisdictional and agency partners, some members of our Transportation Technology Committee, to pick up some of the implementation components. But I do want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome. And don't think we have any other questions, so a motion to adjourn. Not all at once.
I move the adjournment, or have we already done that?
No, you're the first. I'm hearing a second somewhere. I'm sure Amy.
A second.
There we go. Dr. Zhu, thank you. I don't think anybody's opposed. If they are, speak up now and I'll give you a hairy eyeball. But we are adjourned. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. Night, night.
Bye.